All right. Now I'm going to have to hopefully get everybody back on board with this. Let's throw the chat box up there. Let's see if that works for me. And I need to figure out how to find my live link. No idea. There it is. All right. Ben found me. Hello, Ben. I have a lot of light in my eyes. A lot. So we will see how this works. Eventually, in theory, I will figure out how to work this thing. And, hi, Doug. Okay, good. I've got it so that the chat's going to be popping up in the window. Johan set that up for me. Someone was asking where my techie is, and he is hiding in his bedroom. Wants nothing to do with the whole live thing. So he can't help me as I go, but what I will do is next time I'm doing this, I will ask him to figure it out for me beforehand. And I'll just start with so I'm using Streamlabs. That's what he has me set up with. And I should have just trusted it and gone with it, but YouTube makes it easy to stream from YouTube. Only the webcam doesn't always work, and I don't know why, but that's all right. I will figure it out eventually. And then, I don't know. Today at work, I swear, if we could get any more efficient, we would be dangerous. Work was interesting today. First of all, I'm the only woman left standing on my team. We've gone from a 5-man team to a one woman trying to manage all the things, and my boss who has enough on her plate without having to try and do things to support me, and also she's not trained on the tests that I do. I'm not trained on all of the tests the team does. So perversely, today was the happiest I've been at work in months because I was doing the job of 4 people and I was actually busy. I don't know what this says about me, but it was a good day. Things were a cluster. Things went from we knew it wasn't going to be fun to that went wrong, and that meant other things went wrong, and Monday's going to be interesting. The team doesn't start to come back until Tuesday at the earliest. So, now that I think I have managed to probably lose some viewers, but I'm appreciating those of you that are here. Hello, Becky. And I do have some topics that were suggested that I touch on when I put some things up on Facebook and MeWe earlier. And I'm still trying to kind of manage what I'm doing here. All right. So that's Facebook managed. Facebook, MeWe. I think that's enough for the moment. Johan, I am live. I was wrong. He might actually appear. No. He says no. I have no intention of letting my boss know the work I can do the work of 4. I would like to have more work on my plate, but not be this busy all the time. Our department really can't be run with just one person for a lot of reasons, one of which we ran into today. We had to rope somebody else in from a different department because it literally physically could not be done with one person. So, yeah. Uh, hey. Well, among other things, and this is funny because the other day Johan came to me and said, I want to learn how to knit. And that is the one thing that I cannot do. I can crochet. I've been crocheting since I was little, but I can't knit. My oldest daughter tried to teach me. She actually was part of a knitting club that used to meet at the library. That was great fun. I was never able to quite get the knack of casting on. So I asked for help in a group after Johan asked me to teach him how to knit, and got lots of useful suggestions, and I had no idea there were so many ways to cast on. I now have a list of things I'm going to have to look up on YouTube and watch people. I guess there's continental casting on and there's slipknot casting on, and somebody said there's Portuguese knitting, which is different, and I'm just like, it shouldn't surprise me because I did know it's in my bio, and some people seem to think that it's not serious, but it really is serious. I was an apprentice shepherdess for a while. I became an apprentice shepherdess because we always had goats growing up. Mom can't digest cow's milk, so we had goats. And the extension of that, when I was a teenager, we lived in New Hampshire, and we became friends with the farm down the road, and they had merino sheep and Shetland sheep, both of which are known for their ultra-fine wool, and they're extremely soft. You can, on good merino, you can put a newborn infant on good merino wool, and it will not bother their skin. It is that soft. It's the softest fiber, the thinnest fiber that you can get. Shetland rams are, shall we say, agile. So this farm down the road that was owned by our friends had a number of Shetland Merino cross sheep, which are no good if you are selling lambs for fleece or taking them to shows, both of which that they were. So we wound up with a small flock at our place, a few miles down the road, far enough away from the rams, I think. But we had Shetland Merino crosses. And I wound up, because I knew my way around stock and they would sometimes be traveling and need an extra hand, I wound up becoming an apprentice shepherdess. And so I was taught how to spin. I was never very good at it. I can weave. Agile, mobile, and hostile, that pretty much sums it up. Merinos have all the personality of a sofa. Shetlands are a lot closer to goats. So I had learned how to crochet for years before this, but I learned how to weave. I've actually made some primitive looms and woven simple things on them. Hi, Mom. And the one thing I just never managed to learn how to do was knit. I can dye. I've actually made my own natural dyes, which branched into a year or two ago for Inktober. I made my own natural inks. Walnut hulls. Our neighbors have a black walnut tree that drops all the nuts in our yard. And pokeweed berries, which are surprisingly color fast. The test paintings that I did with the pokeweed ink are still vivid. I mean, it's a purpley maroon color. And of course I knew that the ink from the walnut hulls was going to be color fast. Goats are fun. I'm not sure I ever want to keep goats again because my husband would have things to say firmly. But So I have to learn how to knit so that I can teach my son how to knit, or possibly both of us will learn from YouTube videos, since I don't think we have any knitting friends close enough to give us some hands-on classes. What we do have is yarn. Over the years, I've collected a fair amount of yarn. Story time. So my dad's a reenactor. Dad reenacts the French and Indian War era, which is roughly 1740s. While he and I lived together, I wound up going with him to quite a few reenactments. Mom had made me some garb that was authentic to the era, and then I wound up making more period correct garb, both for myself and Dad. And Dad, because he had some health issues, I was basically his pack mule at a lot of these. He had the history knowledge to do the living history and interact with the public on days that we had, but I would go and do things like setting up the tent and whatnot. Long story. So there's two people in period correct 1740s garb. He's in knee breeches and a waistcoat and a linen shirt. I'm in bulky wool skirts over a linen undershirt and a light bodice, because I don't do highfalutin garb, which is it's much more comfortable, the loose wear that I have. So we're driving down the road, my dad's little Mazda pickup truck with gear in the back, including tent poles that are the heck longer than the bed of the truck. And Dad sees a barn sale. And we stop at the barn sale because Dad was driving. So we go into this big old New England barn attached to the house, because in New England they attach the barn to the house usually with a fairly long, narrow structure that gets used for storage or whatever. But the reason for that, of course, is that the winters up there are harsh enough that you really don't want to leave the house to go to the barn, but you don't want the barn right up next to the house because ew. And the barn is almost always bigger than the house because farm. Barns are going to be bigger than the house because, well, hay is bulky, first of all, but also your livelihood was in the barn. You could manage with a small house, but you needed a bigger barn. Always need a bigger barn. So we go in and the barn is packed full, ceiling to the ceiling, with racks of fabric and sewing supplies of all description, and there were shelves and shelves of books, patterns, and the lady sitting there on a stool looking rather disgruntled, and she's like, my mom passed away and she was a hoarder and I'm trying to get rid of all this stuff. And I'm about to cry because I'm like, this is an amazing collection of, but I mean, I also understand that if this lady didn't craft or sew, or it looked like her mom must have been a big time quilter and I don't know what all, but Dad and I didn't have a lot of time because we really did need to get to the reenactment that we were dressed for. Because remember, here we are. This is 2010, 2011. We're in period garb. So we run around for a minute just awestruck at all this stuff. And at the time, I'm sewing garb for Dad. So I'm going through padding fabric, touching it to find wools and linens, things that I could actually use for period correct, because polyester obviously is right out. And there are bins, like big grain bins full of yarns. And she handed me a big black plastic garbage bag, one of the 30-gallon sizes, and she says, you can have a bag full of yarn for $10. Well, I know what I'm touching. So I went through and pulled all of the natural fiber that I could get my hands on. So I had alpaca, I had Angora, I had rabbit, I don't know what all, because I had some of that for years. I still have some of it. There were wools, there were coarse wools. It was more like Cheviot than, there weren't any merino, unfortunately, but So I've got this huge bag full of yarn, and for $10, I mean, yes. So I still have some of that yarn. It's managed to move from New England to Ohio with me. So if I can get the boy to learn how to knit, we have the materials to learn how to knit, because I keep buying cool yarn even though I don't have time to crochet anymore. And one of my older daughter for a while was making adorable little amigurumi creations and selling them, but uh, she ran out of time and just moved to Texas. So I don't think she took any of her yarn with her. She told her brother, and this is why he wants to learn how to knit, she told her brother that he could have it. And he has decided that he needs to learn how to knit so that he can keep his hands busy while he listens to college lectures, which is not an awful idea. It's a good way to focus. And Mom and Beth, I see the conversation that's going on there. Ren fairs are fun. I haven't yet gotten the kids to Ren fair. Reenacting and Ren fair are totally different. Both fun, but in very different ways. I am told that the SCA used to be fun, but then I was told that it's no longer fun, so I haven't bothered. Anyhow, but this leads me into the topic discussion that was suggested, which is that if there's no description of clothing in a story, it's really hard to do garb from the story. So Ronald Zukowski had, Nolan, I'm glad to see you. I hope you're feeling better. I know you can't stay, and I know why. But big hugs, and I will talk to you more online as you can. So Ronald Zukowski requested that I discuss inserting the description of clothing into stories, because if the author does not do that, then fans don't have any way of knowing how to dress up if they want to dress up like characters. And he has a good point. It's not one that I've really... Mom, I had no idea you did SCA. Sanford did too. I kind of wanted to, but I was told that they've gone from being fun to being more about the correct portrayal of history, which is lovely, except for the fact that I have done that and wasn't really interested in doing that period of history. I'm going to try with going forward describing more in the way of clothing. I have been told a few times that I tend towards almost a Heinlein brevity of description. And some of that is I want the reader to be able to imagine on their own what the character looks like. But being able to describe clothing is actually probably a vital part of giving a part of the setting, so your character isn't in limbo. I know that things like Possum Creek Massacre, and he looms up out of the dark behind me. Possum Creek Massacre, because it's set in modern times, I didn't feel any need to describe clothing because it's just regular clothing. Sanford? And I should have described the clothing a little bit more probably in the East Witch, although I do have some description of boiled leather armor in there, which is based actually on the armor that Sanford had made for SCA, since we're still talking about SCA. And we still have that in the shed. It has gotten badly dried and mildewed, and I'm not sure if it can be rescued. We also have a chainmail coif that he made out of galvanized wire. It's incredibly heavy. I've got photos of him wearing it. He looks just like the guy from, shoot, I forget which. It's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the old knight, in that one when he's got that on. And we've put it on Pippa too, and she looks adorable in it. So yes, I should describe clothing more, and it's there's ways to do it without making it long paragraphs, because I find that tedious. I don't like to read it, and so therefore I don't write it. But it is probably, especially when I'm doing fantasy stuff, it's a good idea. It's like, for instance, Eladi in The East Witch, one of the two Leshy siblings. I describe her hair as being dreadlocks of moss and lichens, and in my mind's eye, it's like I can see that mass of shaggy green locks, and possibly even in the spring that she has little flowers that grow in it and bloom in it naturally. So I should probably make sure that I pull more of that out of my head onto the page. Well, that one's already published, Doug, so I can't really rewrite it much. But for the next one, which, since I'm working on Tanager's Flight, the sequel to Tanager's Fledglings, that is something I should consider. I think of their... I'm still going to be talking for a while, Stephen. So they're far future, several hundred years into the future for Tanager's Flight. But I've never been a big fan of the whole concept of, in the future we will all wear monocolor unitards coveralls, because I've worn coveralls and they're really inconvenient. If you need to take them off to go to the bathroom, it's annoying. So I think that this is what I live with. So he wants to be in the video. I need to set it up so I have two microphones so that he can actually be part of the conversation. Oh, Doug, I don't have a problem with writing brevity. It's lengthening it I have a problem with. My general philosophy about writing is to write the story and then worry about editing. Which often means that I have to come back and insert sentences and paragraphs, and in The East Witch, an encounter with the seal woman, because I'm not sure we'll ever get to the point where we don't have to go to the bathroom. At least not in the physical form that we currently inhabit. But other than that, yes. If we got to that point, then sure, unitards. If you're talking about a suit system where it's all hooked up and you can't, I mean, color and clothing, that's sort of, I talked about natural dyes earlier. There exist so many recipes for dyes because we have tried all the things. Royal purple is, you crush a whelk and there's a little teeny tiny bit of purple, so you crush thousands of whelks to have enough purple to do a garment. That they were so color starved that they actually went through the effort to do that. And when you look at writing from the early settling of the United States, the women were trying different things and different mordants and recipes, because they wanted color, and certain colors are just difficult to get. We still only have a few sources for blues. Greens are easy. Yellows, yes. Browns are easy. We can get all the shades of brown that we ever could possibly want. Reds, there's very few things that do red. Madder, not not a lot. Madder and cochineal, which are little tiny bugs. And we still use those for food coloring. Annatto, I think, is a good source for yellow. I don't have a book in front of me, so this is all off the top of my head. But that is something that if you're going to write like colonial science fiction, that actually is a really interesting field to explore, because in talking about fibers, certain fibers take dyes better than others, and they'll take certain colors better than others. Different kinds of fibers can be spun and woven in different ways. I mean, wool is popular because you can raise a sheep and shear it every year, so you're getting a fleece every year from this one sheep, and that sheep is also useful for milk. So you can use it for milk and cheese, and they're very convenient milk and Angora goats, which Beth would testify to. I'm assuming you could probably milk an Angora goat, but it's probably not convenient. I have milked goats with really small teats, and they're not easy. There's a reason that there's different breeds of goats and sheep for different things. And usually if you have one critter that is good for meat and a fleece and milk, they're not very good. They can be all round, but not necessarily the best at, which is where you get into the interesting breeding programs. And like my mom's been interested in heritage breeds, which is the equivalent to your heirloom vegetables that have become so popular. Nubians are definitely a milk goat, and they can actually get to the point where their teats are almost too big. We had a goat named Misty. I don't believe she was a Nubian, if I recall correctly, but she probably had something like that in her, because her udder fell into her teats. And I mean, I was little, and it's probably 7 or 8, but I had to do like both hands to milk her because she was just bigger than I could handle. So you don't want that either. But on the other hand, you don't want a sheep teat that you're having to use fingers on. I've done that. So these are all things that if you're going to write colonial science fiction, you can throw some really interesting facets in that people just don't think about. Okay, so she was purebred alpine. I'm planning on writing a story about Misty. Only it's going to be about all the goats, but I'm just going to take all the goat stories and put it into one story about Misty. This is part of the series of children's books that I'm going to be doing this year. I have 3 planned for this year currently. One will be out by the end of this month that I'm writing with a collaborator. I sent the layout to him today and he likes it, so we are proceeding apace. I have to do a couple of illustrations to finish up things, and that will be the end of the month at the latest, the early February. Sometime later this year, I'm going to be doing a story about Misty the goat, because we've had some funny goat stories over the years. And I'm going to amalgamate them all into Misty. And then later in the year, I will have the Alaskan 12 Days of Christmas. I'll be doing the illustrations for that. The lyrics for it were done years ago by my dad and my uncle and my mom to some extent. So that's kind of an upcoming thing. Oh, and that reminds me that I had set something over here so that I could show it off on camera, because I have my author copies of The Cute Moose now. Yep. I'm going to figure out where my center is, and I'll just move it around there. So I have The Cute Moose in hand. This took forever because I had ordered it but unfortunately, author copies don't get priority for shipping, and like everything Christmas happened first. So I've just gotten these. So I'll be having signed copies will be available for sale on my website, and I'm probably going to do a giveaway. I'm trying to figure out how um, to do that. I may take a page out of my friend Ben Olson's how he does his giveaways for the murder needles, the hair sticks. And I'm so glad Juniper loves it. The feedback that I've gotten from everyone that has seen it has been that they love it. So I'm just really tickled. So this is what the back of the cute moose looks like. And I am looking forward to being able to, I don't know what, do more like this. I loved the fact that this worked. I never expected to be able to write a children's book, so I'm just really happy with it. And yeah, life takes unexpected turns. Speaking of unexpected turns, Mom wanted me to talk a little bit about homeschooling and how that's going. So I just spent a whole bunch of money because Johan will be taking 2 college classes this coming semester. His classes start on the 11th. And the local community college allows high schoolers to take classes because Ohio has a program called College Credit Plus, where high schoolers can actually take classes for free. The reason we didn't do that this year is that we would have had to apply for it last spring, I think. Anyhow, we missed the window for that. This coming year we will. But the other thing too is that homeschoolers are kind of the bottom of the barrel as far as funding goes. So I anticipate a highly increased demand for CCP because of the mess the school system's in right now. So we decided we were just going to enroll him into classes. I mean, he had to apply. He had to take college placement tests. According to the placement tests, he's average for a high schooler right now. And as far as homeschooling progress here, he's been doing all right. The trouble with starting to homeschool him at the age that he is, because he was 15 when we started this, is that he doesn't have the foundation of knowing how. I think it can be done. I'm not going to say that you can't start with homeschooling later in life for the kids, but it's certainly not the same experience that I had where I was homeschooled from first grade onward, because I had learned and had the expectations and understandings of teaching myself in a lot of ways from the beginning. He's used to a very structured classroom environment where he didn't necessarily thrive, but being self-motivated and self-disciplined doesn't come naturally to him. I don't think it does to any child. So that is what a lot of we've been learning this first semester of homeschooling, is learning how to do tasks every day, how to document those. He's looking forward to the college classes, in part because they will give him some structure back, but I think we've set a decent foundation for those, because college, and I actually had this conversation with one of my coworkers the other day. He did really well in high school, but he's smart enough that he never really had to study or work hard at it. And then he hit college and was suddenly in on the deep end because he was not used to not having any structure. So it will be interesting to see how Johan does. We will be taking a standardized test at the end of the year. That's an Ohio requirement. And we'll be able to see at that point how he's done this year. And it'll allow us to evaluate whether or not we want to continue or to go back to school. He would like to continue. He got super excited about homeschooling when he realized that if he does this and if he stays on track and if we can afford the classes, he will get his homeschool diploma and his associate's degree in computer science at the same time. So then he would launch out into the workforce at 18 with an associate's degree, a ton of experience, because a lot of what he's been doing for homeschooling has been involving computer science. He's set up and is running a server with Minecraft on it. He set up a cloud server for the house. We haven't really used it, but he's got some programming under his belt. He's got network stuff under his belt. I think these are all things that he should be able to use. What I've been doing with him is I use Discord, and I have the app on my phone, and he has the app. He may have it on his phone, I don't know, but he has it on his computer. And I talk to him when I have a chance, because I'm at work. And Johan and Sanford butt heads, so I rarely ask them to. It's not that I don't ask them to interact, and they are getting better, but Sanford finds that Johan takes it better if it comes from me. So we're working on it. It's not something that I would have chosen to do at this time with him, except for the fact that the schools around here couldn't make up their minds. It was one plan and then another plan and then another plan. And the online version of schooling that I had done last year when COVID hit was awful. It was really, really bad. And my poor son was depressed and anxious and not getting anything done. And I just didn't want to. I mean, we started classes with Johan in July because I wanted him to show me that he could do it before I officially pulled him out of school. And he did, and I made him earn it, basically, which gave him that much more impetus to want to continue with it, because he has to show that he's earned this, that he can keep it. I had meant to be writing more. I've been very quiet on the blog. The talking about this is probably going to serve as some kind of a journal. I have not had the time and energy to write, or I have ideas that fly through my head and I'm like, that would be a brilliant essay. I should totally write that down, but I'm driving now. And I need to. I don't know how I'm going to find the time. For one thing, I'm going back to school, at least a little bit. I'm taking some classes. I need to pick up some other skills that will allow me to go on a path that isn't where I am, because I'm kind of stuck right now. So I'm going to be taking some data science and data analysis classes, and I've started those. They're not like full-fledged college classes, just getting ready to take an exam, which will be a few $100s, but that's down the road. And I'm working on learning how to draw the human figure this year. So in that aid, I've signed up for a couple of classes on Udemy. I don't know how to pronounce it. Udemy? Udemy? I would like to go back to school and get a full-fledged master's degree or doctorate. I don't have the money or the time. So I'm going to do some certificates. And I'm going to continue writing, and I'm going to continue with the art. The children's books are a priority. I am trying to finish Tanager's Fledgling, or Tanager's Flight, which is a sequel to Tanager's Fledgling. It's a hot mess right now. It needs massive editing. But I'm trying to get it written, and then I'll worry about the editing. And life is always interesting. I'm feeling good since Wednesday. So I got a pulse oximeter so I can track when I'm having an asthma attack. The idea is to collect some data and be able to present it to my doctor and say, hey, I really do need some help here. Even if you can't test me because COVID, then this is what I've got. So we'll see. Let's see here. Someone asked me to talk about garden planning. 'Tis the season to garden plan, at least in my neck of the woods. My plan for my garden this year is very, very scanty. It's going to be to basically maintain the berry bushes and fruit trees that I have in, if the rabbits don't eat them all. I did not have time last summer to garden. I probably won't have time this coming summer to garden. My son was supposed to do a lovely garden last year and was all gung-ho for like 2 weeks, and then it faded away. So I'm not going to count on him. I've got a couple of raised beds. I will probably put some veggies and stuff in there. So my gardening this year is going to be very curtailed. I'm having to push things off my plate and reduce the stress level. It's all right, and we'll get there. It's just a matter of not overdoing it, and I have a tendency to overdo it. Well, I mean, seed catalogs are fun, but if you can't do seed catalogs, you can get okay results with even the El Cheapo 10 for $1 packets from the dollar store. Most of them are hybrid, which means you won't be able to save seed from them and get reliable results. If you want to save seed, the Seed Savers Exchange catalog is definitely the way to go. A lot of heirlooms, and it's obviously designed for that. I do not recommend, I think it's Baker Street or Baker State. They are extremely woke and progressive, and I don't care to support that, and I'm not sure that it's founded in science. I know it's not founded in science, some of the stuff I've seen them sharing on their page, so I don't recommend them, even though they have a very attractive catalog. For the New England and Upper Midwest area, pine tree seeds is excellent and inexpensive. For buying trees and getting some interesting trees and berries, Fedco is good. Territorial Baker Creek, thank you, Beth. Baker Creek is the one I don't recommend. Seed Savers Exchange is good. Territorial seeds are good. Pine tree seeds are good. If you're looking to buy in bulk, then Johnny's is the way to go. You can actually buy things in ½ pound and 1 pound size if you're looking to put in that big of a garden. I never will do a garden that big again because I have no intentions of doing a market garden. In order to put in a decent garden here, my soil has immense amounts of clay in it, enough that I have toyed with the idea of doing pottery, because, but in order to put in a garden, I need to haul several truckloads of horse manure. So here's the thing about horse manure and mulching with hay. Do not do it unless you want weeds. If you're going to use horse manure, it needs to be well composted for at least 2 years. You're still going to get some strange weeds. So there's a thing called the seed bank. And when you first turn over a soil, you expose what's called the seed bank, which is buried weed seeds that suddenly have what they need, whether that's light or different balance of moisture and whatnot. And they'll come up. So anytime you work the ground, you're going to wind up with some interesting plants that weren't there before you turned that ground over. Hay is packed full of seeds. Ask me how I know. Dad mulched the flower beds one year with old hay bales. The next year I was not happy. Weeding never ended. Mulch with straw. Straw is a little bit more expensive. It's totally worth it. What I have done here is I've done a variation on lasagna gardening. And so I'll get old cardboard boxes. We have a Dollar Tree a mile down the road, and I can go there and they break down all their boxes, which is actually ideal for this because you want them broken flat anyway. But they'll give me oodles and oodles of boxes. And you can lay those boxes down and then lay straw over them, and you will effectively suppress anything that's growing. And then you can plant through that. I usually give it a few weeks to get nice and moist so the cardboard will break apart easily. If I wanted to, not if, my son has decided he wants to make new flower beds in a couple of places, and he's already started those. So sometime this next month, I've got to get a hold of some cardboard, and I already have straw, and I've got to shape out those beds. He tried to use weed cloth, which is fine if it's underneath something else, but weed cloth by itself is insufficient. Tips. Blueberries in Ohio are not happy blueberries. Also, the rabbits really, really like them. I bought my dear husband a BB gun for Christmas because I would like him to sit out on the porch and take pot shots at the bunnies. I doubt he will kill them. We can't actually shoot them with anything heavy duty with too many neighbors close by, but I'll bet a BB will get that bunny to go. But yeah, no, cardboard boxes and then straw on top of it. That's great. I've even done it just straight over lawn to kill off lawn, and then you get your ready-made. The other thing that I experimented with in New Hampshire, yes, we have a dog. The dog is on a run. The dog is not allowed free run of the backyard because, well, two reasons. One, when we moved in, the gate was missing from the backyard fence, and we debated replacing it. It was going to be a few $100s because it's chain link, and it would have to be a big one to cover the back driveway. But then we realized that at 2 a.m., the darn dog was going to run all the way down to the back of the lot. We have a long, narrow lot, and she was going to bark her fool head off, and we'd have to put on clothes and shoes to go out and get her to come back in the house. So instead, the dog is on a long run between the house and the shed, which means that the bunnies can't go within her radius, but that doesn't cover even all of the backyard, let alone the front yard. Teaching the boy how to set snares is actually not a bad idea. I may do that. I saw some leg hold traps in an antique shop, and I contemplated those, but I figured that'd freak the neighbors out, so. But I was going to say that the gardening thing that I had experimented with in New Hampshire is hugelkultur, which is using rotted wood or rotted logs, essentially as a water sponge. So they actually pull a lot of nitrogen out of the soil as they're breaking down. So you don't want to rely on the log to feed your plants, because it won't. It'll actually do the opposite. You need to fertilize heavily if you're going to do hugelkultur. But what they do is that they soak up moisture and hold it and then slowly release it back out into the soil. The experiment that I did was um, I took a big muck bucket, I don't know, like a half a 55-gallon barrel thing. That's not what it was, but it's essentially the same size. And I filled it about 2/3 full with some rotten firewood. And then I put potting soil in on top of it. Unamended potting soil, so it didn't have any of the moisture control granules, which are just silicone gel, by the way. You can dump out the guts of a diaper into potting soil, and it does that. And then I planted herbs, and this plastic bucket full of my hugelkultur, I set out on. We had an asphalt pad, and I did not water it all summer, and it did fantastic. So that was my mini experimental hugelkultur. And I started to do it on a bigger basis in the garden, and then I moved away. It's not a bad idea for where I am now, except that I really don't have that much in the way of rotten wood. We don't have any actual trees on our place, although, come to think of it, one of the neighbor's dead trees fell down, broke our fence, and is laying in our yard. It got cut up somewhat, but we were trying to figure out what to do with it. So maybe I'll use that this next year and do a little experimental bed. Yeah, no watering. That's the whole point. Is the rotten wood releases the water back out slowly, so you get a nice. It's like putting a sponge in there. And I mean, New Hampshire summers are hot and humid, but relatively short. So I'm not sure what the difference would be. Mom says she's done it in Eastern Oregon. She lived in the high desert. There's the Klamath Plateau there in Eastern Oregon is where Mom was living until she moved to Kentucky. And now that she's in Kentucky, I'm sure she doesn't need to worry about watering at all. The fun thing about moving to Ohio was it's so green. There's times that it really reminds me, there's places I've been here in Ohio that remind me of the Pacific Northwest. And there's definitely a lot of it that reminds me of when I went to Ireland. So that's part of what I like about it. It doesn't mean that we don't sometimes have dry spells. August tends to be dry here. But it's been nice, and it's definitely nice. Like right now, we're looking at mid to high 30s during the day in January, which might not seem like much, but when you've spent 20 odd years in New England, I will take it. I debated taking a walk today, but it was windy and 32, and I was not dressed for it, so I just came home after work. That is one thing I'm looking forward to, is more light during the day. Right now, I drive to work in the dark, and I come home and it's the sunset. And that's when we can see the sun at all, because southern Ohio is very gray, which is the light I have set up right now for the filming of this. I have a happy light panel that I bought, and I've been using that the last few days, and maybe that's part of the reason I've been in a good mood. Anyhow, so let's see here. I don't know that I hit every topic that people wanted me to talk about, but it's been really nice to talk to everybody and see the comments, and and I thank you all for coming. I look forward to doing this again next week. If you have something that you would like for me to talk about. So Martin Shoemaker gave me an excellent idea. The man's a fantastic writer, one of the best hard science fiction writers in the business. If you haven't checked out his books, you should. Now, plug over. Martin pointed out that my interests are broad. So I like science, and I like cooking, and I like gardening. And he said, what if I were to do um, put together a thing that was basically like I can't remember the name, James Burke, I think. There was a show called Connections. I've never seen it, I've heard of it. But he was saying that take basically something from farm to table, talk about the science in a particular dish, and some of the history behind it, and just kind of blend all that in together. And I think that's a really great idea. I'm not going to do it every week because it's going to take some research. And I think it probably shouldn't be alive, because if I do it, I would want to do some video of some of the cooking. And I'm thinking about doing some of it with foraging, gathering wild things. Um, Sanford and I were just talking the other day about chicory, and how he remembers chicory coffee as being awful, but he was little. And I have never actually bothered to make chicory coffee. So I have thoughts. I want to do his jam cake that was his mom's recipe. Um, and I want to do a cheap version of ribs for my future son-in-law, because evidently that's his favorite dish, but a whole rack of ribs is too expensive for my young, lovely couple that are in Texas now. So, yeah. Hunt, gather, cook. That's a good title. I have been neglecting eat this while you read that, but this might fill the niche on that. But I think I have taken an hour of your time, and it has been delightful, and I'm excited. I always am. This is, I don't know about you all, but this feeds me. This feeds the spirit. And I hope it is giving you guys some things to think about and interests. And thank you for letting me ramble at you. And yeah, I think that I will stop here before I just ramble on to nothing. Well, if I'm going to do cheese, I should probably come down and talk to Mom, although I do technically know how to make some simple cheeses. Very simple. Until next time, and then perhaps with cheese.